Sophia Rivers was deep in concentration, reviewing the quarterly marketing reports when her phone buzzed with an urgency that made her stomach drop. The caller ID showed Victoria's elementary school, and any parent knows that schools don't call during work hours with good news. Sophia's heart raced as she answered, already knowing that whatever came next would complicate her carefully balanced life. Mrs. Patterson. The school nurse spoke with that professional tone that immediately puts parents on high alert. Victoria had been feeling sick during math class, complaining of a terrible headache and stomach pain. The 8-year-old had even thrown up in the classroom, which was unlike her usually healthy daughter. They needed Sophia to pick her up immediately, and there was no negotiating the urgency in the nurse's voice. Sophia glanced around the bustling office of Cross Technologies, where everyone seemed glued to their screens, working on projects that demanded absolute focus. The company culture here was intense, driven by results and deadlines that left little room for personal emergencies. She had been working here for 2 years, building a reputation as someone reliable and dedicated. But moments like this reminded her of the impossible balance between being a single mother and maintaining a demanding career. Facing the lion's den, Julian Cross was not just any boss. At 35, he had built Cross Technologies from a small startup into a billion-dollar empire that dominated the tech industry. His corner office was a testament to success, its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, and walls lined with awards that told the story of his remarkable rise to power. But beyond the impressive achievements, Julian was known throughout the company for his rigid standards and inflexible approach to work schedules. Sophia had seen countless employees struggle to balance personal needs with Julian's expectations. He believed that dedication meant being present, focused, and available whenever the company needed you. In his 2 years as her direct supervisor, she had never seen him leave the office before 8 in the evening, and he expected the same commitment from his team. The thought of asking him for early release filled her with dread. She knocked softly on his office door, gathering every ounce of professional courage she possessed. Julian looked up from his computer screen, his dark eyes immediately focusing on her with the intensity that made him such a formidable businessman. He was the kind of man who commanded attention without saying a word, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit that spoke of both success and authority. The moment of truth, Sophia. Explain the situation as clearly and professionally as possible. Victoria was sick and needed to be picked up from school immediately. She emphasized that all her work for the day was completed and submitted, hoping this would make her request more reasonable. But she could see Julian processing her words with the same analytical approach he applied to every business decision. The silence stretched between them as Julian leaned back in his leather chair, his fingers drumming against his mahogany desk in a rhythm that seemed to measure not just seconds, but the weight of policy against human need. Sophia had learned to read his expressions over the past 2 years, and she could see him weighing the situation with the same careful consideration he gave $2 million deals. Finally, Julian spoke, and his words carried that crisp authority that had built his empire. He reminded her of the company policy regarding work schedules, not with cruelty, but with the institutional firmness that had made Cross Technologies successful. Every employee knew the rules, and exceptions were rare, granted only under the most extraordinary circumstances. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of a simple yes or no, Julian presented her with what he called a business proposition. He explained that he often attended high-profile social events, charity galas, and business dinners where having an intelligent, sophisticated companion would be beneficial. These weren't romantic engagements, he emphasized, but strategic appearances where the right partner could help navigate complex social situations. The shocking proposal Julian offer was both generous and startling. In exchange for accompanying him to these events, Sophia would receive complete flexibility with her work schedule. She could leave early whenever Victoria needed her, work from home when necessary, and never again face the stress of choosing between her daughter and her career. The arrangement would be professional, he assured her, a mutually beneficial agreement where both parties got exactly what they needed. Sophia felt her worlds shift as she processed the magnitude of what Julian was proposing. This wasn't just about leaving early one afternoon. This was about fundamentally changing her relationship with both her job and her boss. She would be stepping into Julian's personal life, albeit in a professional capacity, and entering a world of wealth and sophistication that she had only observed from a distance. The practical part of her mind immediately began calculating the benefits. No more desperate calls to neighbors when Victoria was sick. No more anxiety about school events that conflicted with important meetings. No more impossible choices between being a good employee and being a good mother. Julian was offering her a solution to the problem that had dominated her life for the past 2 years. But there was something else in his offer. Something that made her heart race in a way that had nothing to do with anxiety. The way Julian looked at her when he made the proposal suggested this wasn't purely a business decision. There was an intensity in his gaze that spoke of something more personal, though she couldn't quite identify what it was. The weight of decision. Julian seemed to understand the complexity of what he was asking. He told her to take her time, to think about it carefully, and to give him an answer the following day. But first, he insisted, she should go immediately to pick up Victoria and take care of her daughter. For the first time since she had known him, Julian's voice carried a warmth that surprised her, a recognition of the parent's instinct that always puts the child first. As Sophia gathered her things to leave, she felt as though she was walking away from one life and toward another. The drive to Victoria's school gave her time to process what had just happened. Julian Cross, the demanding billionaire who rarely showed personal interest in his employees, had just offered her a deal that would solve her biggest life challenge, while opening doors to experiences she had never imagined possible. Victoria was waiting in the nurse's office, looking pale but relieved to see her mother. The 8-year-old apologized for getting sick at school, displaying the premature responsibility that children of single parents often develop. Sophia hugged her daughter tightly, assuring her that she never needed to apologize for needing her mother, and that taking care of her would always be the most important priority. During the drive home to their modest apartment, Sophia found herself glancing in the rearview mirror at Victoria, who was already looking better. The contrast between her daughter's simple needs and the complexity of Julian's proposal created a strange tension in her mind. On one hand, she had the straightforward love and responsibility of motherhood. On the other, she faced an opportunity that could transform both their lives in ways she was only beginning to understand. The night of reflection after, settling Victoria on the couch with her favorite blanket and some soup, Sophia sat at her small kitchen table with a cup of tea and tried to process everything that had happened. The apartment felt different somehow, as if Julian's proposal had introduced possibilities that made her familiar surroundings seem smaller and more limiting than before. She thought about the events Julian had mentioned, imagining herself in elegant dresses, moving through circles of wealth and influence that she had only seen in movies. The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. She was confident in her professional abilities, but navigating high society was entirely different from managing marketing, campaigns, and coordinating meetings. Yet there was something about Julian's offer that suggested he believed she was capable of more than she had shown in the office. He had seen something in her that made him think she could handle the sophisticated social world he inhabited. The recognition was flattering, but it also raised questions about why he had chosen her specifically for this unusual arrangement. As the evening progressed and Victoria fell asleep, Sophia found herself imagining what it would be like to work alongside Julian in this new capacity. She had always been aware of his presence, his commanding personality, and his obvious success, but she had never allowed herself to think of him as anything other than her boss. Now, the prospect of spending personal time with him, even in a professional context, introduced emotions she wasn't sure she was ready to examine. The decision ahead of her was more than just about work flexibility and social events. It was about stepping into an unknown world, trusting a man she had only known in a business context, and risking the comfortable, predictable life she had built for herself in Victoria. But as she looked around their small apartment and thought about the constant stress of balancing work and motherhood, she realized that Julian's proposal might be exactly the opportunity she had been waiting for without even knowing it. Sophia arrived at Cross Technologies 15 minutes early, just as she had done every morning for the past 2 years. But this morning felt different. The familiar routine of checking emails and organizing her desk was interrupted. by the weight of the decision she had made during a sleepless night, Victoria had recovered completely by morning. Chattering happily about her upcoming school science project, unaware that her mother was about to enter an entirely new chapter of their lives. The conversation with Julian was brief but decisive. Sophia accepted his proposal with conditions that surprised even herself. She insisted on a written agreement that outlined exactly what would be expected of her. Specific notice for events, so she could arrange childcare, and complete discretion about their arrangement from other employees. Julian listened to her terms with an expression that seemed to mix respect with something close to admiration. Within hours, the first test of their new arrangement arrived. Julian informed her about a charity gala scheduled for the following Saturday evening, a high-profile event supporting children's education that would bring together the city's most influential philanthropists and business leaders. The cause was meaningful to Sophia, but the social pressure of attending such an event made her stomach flutter with nervousness. Julian handed her a credit card with casual ease that took her breath away. He explained that she would need an appropriate dress, shoes, and accessories for the evening. The card had no limit, he mentioned offhandedly, as if unlimited spending power was a normal part of everyday conversation. Sophia stared at the piece of plastic that represented more purchasing power than she had ever held in her hands. The transformation begins. The shopping experience at the city's most exclusive boutique was unlike anything Sophia had ever encountered. The sales associates treated her with a deference that felt surreal, bringing champagne while she tried on gowns that cost more than her monthly salary. Each dress was a work of art, crafted from fabrics so luxurious they seemed to shimmer with their own light. Standing in front of the three-way mirror wearing a midnight blue gown that hugged her curves perfectly, Sophia barely recognized herself. The woman looking back at her appeared confident, sophisticated, and elegant in ways she had never imagined possible. The dress transformed not just her appearance, but something deeper, awakening a sense of grace and poise she didn't know she possessed. The sales associate, a refined woman named Catherine, worked with the skill of someone who understood that clothing was about more than covering the body. She selected accessories that complemented Sophia's natural beauty rather than overwhelming it. Diamond earrings that caught the light subtly, a delicate bracelet that added just the right amount of sparkle, and shoes that were both stunning and surprisingly comfortable. When Sophia returned to the office with her purchases, she felt as though she was carrying the props for a play in which she would soon perform. The other employees noticed the luxury shopping bags, but were too professional to comment directly. However, she caught curious glances and overheard whispered conversations that made her wonder how long their arrangement could remain. Private, the first performance Saturday evening arrived with an anticipation that made Sophia's hands shake slightly as she applied her makeup. Mrs. Martinez, her elderly neighbor, had agreed to watch Victoria. Charmed by the idea that Sophia was attending such a prestigious event, the 8-year-old was fascinated by her mother's transformation. Declaring that Sophia looked like a princess from her favorite fairy tales, Julian arrived precisely on time, and the sight of him in a perfectly tailored tuxedo reminded Sophia why he commanded such respect in the business world. He carried himself with an effortless authority that seemed natural rather than forced. But what struck her most was the way his expression changed when he saw her. For a moment, his professional composure slipped, revealing something more personal and genuinely appreciative. The drive to the hotel where the gala was being held gave them time to review their story. They had known each other through work, Julian explained, and had recently begun dating. The relationship was still new, which would explain any awkwardness in their interactions. Sophia practiced calling him by his first name instead of Mr. Cross, a small change that felt surprisingly intimate. The hotel ballroom was spectacular, filled with flowers that must have cost thousands of dollars and lighting that made everything seem magical. Sophia had attended work events before, but nothing that approached this level of elegance and sophistication. Every detail spoke of wealth and influence. From the orchestra playing classical music to the waiters serving champagne and crystal glasses that probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget. Navigating social waters, Julian introduced her to a steady stream of people whose names she recognized. From business magazines and society pages, each conversation required her to balance genuine friendliness with a careful navigation of questions about her background and relationship with Julian. She found herself drawing on skills she didn't know she had, reading social cues and adjusting her responses to match the expectations of each new person they met. Mrs. Harrison, the wife of a prominent judge, seemed particularly interested in learning about Sophia's history with Julian. Her questions had the surface politeness of social conversation, but carried an undertone of evaluation that made Sophia feel as though she was being tested. Julian stayed close during these interactions, his hand resting lightly on her back in a gesture that felt both protective and possessive. The most challenging moment came when they encountered Rebecca Stone, Julian's former girlfriend, and a woman who seemed to embody everything Sophia had always imagined wealthy socialites to be. Rebecca was stunning in an obvious way, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a designer dress that probably cost more than Sophia's car. But more intimidating than her appearance was the way she looked at Julian, with a familiarity that spoke of intimate shared history. Rebecca's greeting was polite but cool, and her eyes assessed Sophia with the kind of thorough evaluation that women give to potential rivals. She asked pointed questions about how long Sophia had been dating Julian, where they had met, and what she did for work. Each question felt like a small challenge, testing whether Sophia belonged in this world or was simply playing dress-up for the evening. Unexpected chemistry. What surprised Sophia most was how naturally she and Julian fell into the rhythm of appearing as a couple. When he placed his hand on her lower back to guide her through the crowd, the gesture felt genuine rather than performed. When she laughed at something he whispered in her ear, the amusement was real, not manufactured for their audience. The line between acting and authenticity began to blur in ways that both thrilled and confused her. During dinner, seated at a table with some of the city's most powerful people, Sophia found herself genuinely enjoying the conversations. The topics ranged from art to politics to business, and she discovered that her perspective was not only welcome but valued. Julian seemed proud to have her beside him, and several times she caught him watching her with an expression that seemed to go beyond their professional arrangement. The dancing portion of the evening provided the most intimate moments of their performance. Julian was an excellent dancer, leading her confidently through waltzes and foxtrots that she had only seen in movies. Being held in his arms, moving together to music played by a live orchestra, created a romantic atmosphere that made it easy to forget they were acting. His hand was warm and steady on her waist, and she could feel the strength in his arms as he guided her through the steps. During one particularly slow song, Julian pulled her closer, and Sophia found herself looking up into his dark eyes with an intensity that had nothing to do with their agreement. For a moment, the ballroom full of people seemed to disappear, leaving just the two of them moving together in perfect synchronization. The connection she felt was undeniable, and from the way Julian was looking at her, she suspected he was experiencing something similar. Cracks in the performance, though. Evening's most revealing moment came when Rebecca approached them during a break in the dancing. She congratulated Julian on his new relationship, but made several comments that seemed designed to highlight the differences in Sophia's background. References to exclusive schools, family connections, and social events that Sophia had never heard of were woven into the conversation with surgical precision. Julian's response surprised everyone, including Sophia. Instead of allowing Rebecca to continue her subtle attack, he firmly redirected the conversation to Sophia's professional achievements and her work in marketing. He spoke about her intelligence and dedication with genuine admiration, making it clear that he valued substance over social connections. His defense of her felt personal. Julian to be so protective of his new companion? The interaction revealed something about their past relationship that suggested Julian was clearly no longer interested in the superficial attractions that Rebecca represented. The ride home, as their car pulled away from the hotel, both Sophia and Julian were quiet, processing the evening's events. The successful navigation of their first public appearance together had created a sense of accomplishment, but it had also raised questions about the nature of their arrangement that neither was quite, particularly the encounter with Rebecca. His appreciation seemed genuine, and Sophia realized that defending her had cost him something socially. Rebecca was well-connected and influential, and Julian's clear choice of Sophia over his former girlfriend would be noticed and discussed by their social circle. Sophia admitted that the conversations had been stimulating, the environment beautiful, and the company more pleasant than she had anticipated. She had discovered that she was capable of moving in these social circles with grace and confidence, a revelation that opened up possibilities she had never considered before. But the most significant realization was the undeniable chemistry that had developed between them throughout the evening. What had begun as a professional arrangement was evolving into something more complex and emotionally charged. Neither of them spoke about it directly, but the awareness hung in the air between them like an unspoken question about where their relationship was. Heading as they pulled up to Sophia's modest apartment building, the contrast between her real life and the world they had just left was stark. Julian walked her to her door, and for a moment they stood there in the dim hallway light, still dressed in their elegant evening wear but back in the reality of her everyday world. The kiss goodnight that their audience might have expected didn't happen, but the lingering look they shared suggested that both were thinking about it. Sophia quietly let herself into the apartment, where Mrs. Martinez reported that Victoria had been an angel and was sleeping soundly. After paying the babysitter and checking on her daughter, Sophia sat on her bed still wearing the beautiful gown, trying to process everything that had happened. The evening had been a success by any measure, but it had also awakened feelings and possibilities that complicated what was supposed to be a simple business arrangement. Looking at herself in the bedroom mirror, Sophia realized that the woman who had left the apartment that evening was not quite the same person who had returned. Something fundamental had shifted, not just in how she saw herself, but in how she understood the trajectory of her life. The world Julian had introduced her to was seductive and exciting, but more importantly, it had shown her capabilities and desires she had never fully acknowledged before. Part 3. Hearts Unveiled, Day New Chapter. Begins 3 weeks had passed since the charity gala, and the dynamic between Sophia and Julian had shifted in subtle but significant ways. Their professional interactions carried an undercurrent of shared experience that made routine meetings feel. Sophia had attended 2 more events, each one building her confidence while deepening the complexity of her relationship with Julian. The flexibility he had promised was proving genuine. When Victoria developed a fever on a Tuesday morning, Sophia simply sent Julian a text explaining the situation. His response was immediate and understanding, telling her to take care of her daughter and work from home for the rest of the week. The absence of judgment or frustration in his message revealed a consideration that went, her 8-year-old intuition detecting changes in their routine that Sophia struggled to explain. Mrs. Martinez, their neighbor, had made several knowing comments about how radiant Sophia looked lately, her elderly wisdom recognizing signs of emotional transformation that Sophia herself was still learning to understand. The announcement that would change everything came on a Friday afternoon. Julian called Sophia into his office with an expression that mixed business focus with something more personal. Cross Technologies had been invited to present at the International Tech Innovation Summit in San Francisco, a prestigious 3-day conference that would showcase the company's latest developments to potential investors and industry leaders worldwide. The business trip proposal Julian explained that the conference would require his full attention for networking and presentations, but the social aspects would be crucial for building relationships with international partners. He needed someone who could navigate the complex social dynamics while representing the company with intelligence and sophistication. The trip would span 5 days, including travel time and several formal events that required the kind of partnership they had been developing. The magnitude of what Julian was suggesting hit Sophia immediately. This wasn't a single evening in their home city where she could return to her normal life afterward. This was asking her to step fully into his world for nearly a week, to travel with him, stay in the same hotel, and maintain their performance in an environment where they would be together almost constantly. Sophia's first concern was Victoria, but Julian had already considered this challenge. He offered to hire a professional nanny for the week, someone with impeccable credentials who could stay at Sophia's apartment and maintain Victoria's routine. the cost would be covered completely. And he assured her that her daughter's comfort and security were his primary concerns after Sophia's own. The practical arrangements Julian described demonstrated a level of thoughtfulness that surprised her. He had researched the best child care services, identified someone who specialized in temporary situations, and even planned for emergency contacts in case any issues arose. His attention to Victoria's well-being revealed a consideration for Sophia's role as a mother that went beyond mere business. Efficiency. Preparing for the journey the week before their departure was filled with preparations that felt both professional and intensely personal. Julian arranged for Sophia to have an entire wardrobe selected for the trip. From business casual outfits for daytime events to formal gowns for evening galas, each piece was chosen not just for its quality, but for how it would complement her natural elegance and help her feel confident in unfamiliar situations. During their planning sessions, Julian shared details about the other attendees that revealed his deep understanding of business psychology and social dynamics. He explained which investors preferred casual conversation about family, which executives responded better to direct professional discussions, and which social situations required careful navigation of cultural differences and international business protocols. What struck Sophia most was Julian's confidence in her ability to handle these complex interactions. He spoke about her role not as someone who would simply accompany him, but as a true partner who would contribute meaningfully to their success. His faith in her capabilities awakened ambitions she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge, possibilities that extended far beyond their current arrangement. The evening before their flight, Sophia sat with Victoria reviewing the week's schedule with Mrs. Martinez and the professional nanny, Diana, who would be staying with them. Victoria seemed excited about the adventure of having two caregivers, but Sophia could see the underlying questions in her daughter's eyes about why this trip was so important, what it meant for their future. San Francisco revelations. Flight to San Francisco provided their first extended time alone together outside of work events. In the private comfort of first-class seats, Julian revealed aspects of his personality that had remained hidden during their previous interactions. He spoke about his childhood, growing up with parents who were successful but emotionally distant, and how that experience had shaped his approach to business and relationships. Sophia found herself sharing stories about Victoria's father, a relationship that had ended when she discovered she was pregnant and realized that her partner was not ready for the responsibilities of parenthood. The conversation created a level of intimacy and mutual understanding that surprised both of them, revealing vulnerabilities that neither had intended to share when their arrangement began. Their hotel suite in San Francisco overlooked the bay, with two separate bedrooms connected by an elegant sitting area that would serve as their private space between public appearances. The accommodations were luxurious beyond anything Sophia had experienced. But what impressed her most was Julian's natural consideration for her comfort and privacy. He established boundaries that made their cohabitation feel respectful rather than presumptuous. The first day of the conference demonstrated the full extent of Julian's professional capabilities. Watching him present Cross Technologies innovations to an audience of international investors and industry leaders, Sophia understood why he had achieved such remarkable success. His combination of technical knowledge, strategic thinking, and natural charisma was genuinely impressive, dancing on dangerous ground. Evening Gala, on their second night in San Francisco, became the turning point in their relationship, held in a restored historic ballroom overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge. The event brought together the tech industry's most influential figures in an atmosphere that blended business networking with sophisticated social interaction. Sophia wore a deep emerald gown that Julian had specifically requested, explaining that the color would complement her eyes and project the confidence that international partners respected. Standing beside him as he introduced her to executives from companies whose names dominated global headlines, she felt a sense of belonging that went beyond mere performance. The most significant moment came during the dancing portion of the evening. As they moved together to music played by a string quartet, Julian pulled her closer than their usual careful distance required. The physical proximity created an awareness that neither could ignore, a connection that transcended their professional arrangement and entered territory that felt genuinely romantic. Julian's hand was firm and warm against her back, and when Sophia looked up to meet his eyes, she saw an intensity that had nothing to do with business networking or social performance. The chemistry that had been building between them over the past month crystallized into something undeniable, and from the way other couples were looking at them, their connection was clearly visible to everyone in the ballroom during a slow song. Julian spoke quietly near her ear, his voice carrying an intimacy that made her heart race. He thanked her for how perfectly she had handled every aspect of the trip, but his words carried implications that went far beyond professional appreciation. The warmth in his voice and the way he held her suggested feelings that neither of them had been willing to acknowledge directly. The confession, the breakthrough, came on their final evening in San Francisco. As they sat on the private balcony of their suite watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors over the bay, Julian had been quieter than usual throughout the day, and Sophia could sense that he was processing something significant that went beyond the success of the conference. Julian began by acknowledging how much their arrangement had evolved beyond what either of them had originally intended. What had started as a practical solution to her work flexibility needs and his social networking requirements had developed into something far more complex and meaningful. He admitted that somewhere along the way, his feelings had shifted from professional respect to something much deeper and more personal. The confession that followed was delivered with the same honesty and directness that Julian brought to important business decisions. He told Sophia that he had fallen in love with her, not with the sophisticated version of herself that attended galas and conferences, but with the woman who worried about her daughter, who brought intelligence and compassion to every situation, and who had brought a warmth to his life that he hadn't realized was missing. Julian's vulnerability in that moment was complete and genuine. He explained that their business arrangement had originally appealed to him partly because it provided a way to spend time with her, without the risks that came with conventional dating. He had been attracted to her professional competence and natural grace long before their first event together, but had not allowed himself to pursue those feelings because of their working relationship. Sophia's response came after a long moment of silence. As she processed the magnitude of what Julian had shared, she admitted that she had been fighting her own growing feelings, telling herself that the chemistry between them was just good acting and professional compatibility. But the truth was that she had begun to see past his successful businessman exterior to the thoughtful, caring man underneath. She confessed that their time together had awakened parts of herself that had been dormant since Victoria's birth. The confidence she felt in his world, the intellectual stimulation of their conversations, and the way he had seamlessly incorporated concern for Victoria into all their arrangements had touched her more deeply than she had been willing to admit. The kiss that followed was inevitable, carrying all the emotion and connection that had been building between them over the past month. It was gentle at first, tentative, as if both were acknowledging that crossing this line would fundamentally change everything between them. But as the kiss deepened, it carried the passion of feelings that had been carefully contained for too long. When they finally separated, both were breathing heavily. The air between them was charged with possibilities that neither had dared to imagine when their arrangement began. Julian asked if she regretted what had just happened, and Sophia's answer was immediate and certain. She had no regrets about finally being honest about her feelings, but she needed to know that this was real for him and not just an extension of their performance. A new agreement there. Conversation continued late into the night as they worked through the implications of their changed relationship. Julian was clear that his feelings were genuine and had nothing to do with their business arrangement. He wanted to pursue a real relationship with her, one based on mutual affection rather than professional necessity. But he also understood that the situation was complicated by their work, relationship, and her responsibilities as a mother. Sophia expressed her concerns about how a relationship would affect their professional dynamic and what it would mean for Victoria. Julian's response demonstrated the thoughtfulness that had characterized all his actions toward her family. He wanted to meet Victoria properly, to build a relationship with her daughter that was based on genuine care rather than obligation, and to support Sophia's role as a mother in whatever way she needed. The practical aspects of their new relationship would require careful navigation. Julian suggested that Sophia might want to consider transitioning to a different role within the company to avoid potential conflicts of interest, but only if she was comfortable with such a change. He was adamant that her career advancement should not be limited by their personal relationship. As dawn broke over San Francisco Bay, Sophia and Julian sat together, planning a future that neither had imagined possible when she first asked to leave work early to care for her sick daughter. Their conversation covered everything from how to introduce Julian to Victoria to how they would handle their relationship becoming known among their colleagues and social circle. The flight home, the return flight to their home city, carried a different energy than their trip to San Francisco. Instead of nervous anticipation about performing their roles, they traveled as a couple who had finally acknowledged their genuine feelings for each other. Julian held Sophia's hand during takeoff, a simple gesture that carried profound meaning about their transformed relationship. They discussed how to approach the transition from their business arrangement to a real romantic relationship. Both agreed that honesty with Victoria would be essential, though they would introduce the concept gradually to help her adjust to the idea of Julian becoming a more permanent part of their lives. Sophia appreciated Julian's understanding that her daughter's well-being would always be her first priority. Julian shared his vision for their future together, speaking not just about romantic possibilities, but about how they could build a life that honored both their professional ambitions and their family responsibilities. His willingness to adapt his lifestyle to accommodate it. Victoria's needs demonstrated a commitment that went far beyond the passion of new romance. Coming home when they arrived at Sophia's apartment, Victoria ran to greet her mother with the enthusiasm of a child who had missed her parent terribly. Julian watched their reunion with an expression that revealed his understanding of the sacred bond between mother and daughter. His introduction to Victoria was gentle and respectful, showing immediate interest in her school projects and hobbies without trying to force familiarity. Mrs. Martinez and Diana both commented on how happy Sophia looked, and the elderly neighbor's knowing smile suggested she had recognized the signs of a woman who had found love. Victoria was curious about Julian, but not suspicious. Accepting her mother's explanation that he was a good friend who might be spending more time with them, as Julian prepared to leave that evening, he and Sophia stood at her door much as they had after their first gala together. But this time, the goodnight kiss was real, carrying the promise of a future built on genuine affection rather than professional arrangement. Their business agreement had ended, but their love story was just beginning. Over the following weeks, Julian and Sophia navigated the delicate process of transforming their professional relationship into a romantic partnership. They were careful to maintain appropriate boundaries at work while allowing their personal connection to deepen gradually. Victoria warmed to Julian quickly, charmed by his genuine interest in her world and his respectful approach to becoming part of their family. The love that had begun with a simple request for work flexibility had evolved into something far more profound and lasting. Sophia and Julian had discovered that the best relationships often begin in the most unexpected ways, and that sometimes the most practical arrangements can lead to the most extraordinary love stories. Their future stretched ahead of them, full of possibilities that neither had dared to dream when their journey together first began.